Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Unfiltered and Unapologetic. I'm your host, Caitlin Gil-Soto, and this is a space where we have honest conversations about faith, wealth, wellness, relationships, personal growth, and the cultural and emotional experiences that shape who we become. The conversations our families didn't always have, the lessons life teaches us anyway, and what it actually looks like to build a life that feels aligned with who you're becoming. So, whether you're driving, cleaning, at the gym, out for a walk, or avoiding a text message you've been meaning to answer, I'm glad you're here. Let's get into today's episode. So today's episode is called What Happens When Boys Become Men Without Emotional Tools. I want to begin with a question. Have you ever wondered why some men seem completely comfortable to talk about work, sports, money, politics, or almost anything else? But when it comes to talking about how they feel, they suddenly become quiet. As I've gotten older, I've noticed something interesting. Many men are incredibly capable in so many areas of life. They work hard, they solve problems, they take on responsibilities, they provide for the people they love. But when it comes to emotions, vulnerability, or asking for support, many seem to struggle. And before we go any further, I want to make something clear. This is not true for every man. And it doesn't mean women have everything figured out emotionally either. Today we're talking about patterns, not every individual experience. Since June is Men's Mental Health Month, I wanted to dedicate an episode to a question that I think affects not only men, but also the people who love them, who work with them, who raise them, and share life with them. Because I don't believe the problem is that men don't have emotions. I think men experience emotions just like everyone else. The question is whether they were ever given the tools to understand them. And that's what we're going to explore today. When conversations about men's mental health come up, people often say things like, boys are not taught to cry. And while there may be some truth to that, I think the conversation is more complex because many boys are taught a lot of valuable things. Many are taught to work hard, to be responsible, to protect the people that they love, to persevere through challenges, to be independent, to keep their word, to provide for themselves and others, to be resilient when life gets difficult. None of these things are inherently bad. In fact, many of those qualities can be incredibly positive and valuable. The challenge is that emotional skills aren't always taught alongside them. A boy may learn how to solve problems, but not how to process grief. He may learn how to work through discomfort, but not how to communicate emotional pain. He may learn how to take care of others, but not how to ask for help when he needs it. He may learn how to keep going, but not how to slow down. And over time, many people begin to associate strength with self-sufficiency. The message becomes, handle it yourself, figure it out, keep it moving, don't burden anyone. Again, this isn't true for every family, every culture, or every individual. But for many people, emotional education simply wasn't part of the conversation. And when certain skills aren't taught, we shouldn't be surprised when people struggle to use them later in life. I have some journal prompts here for you guys. So, what messages did I receive about emotions growing up? What emotions felt acceptable to express, and which ones felt uncomfortable or unsafe? But before we go any further, I want to revisit something we talked about in the season 1 finale. Your emotions are messengers. In that episode, we discussed the idea that emotions aren't problems to be eliminated. They're information, they're signals, they're messengers trying to tell us something about our experiences, needs, boundaries, fears, values, or relationships. But understanding that emotions are messengers and knowing how to understand those messages are two different things. Because what happens if nobody teaches you the language? What happens if nobody teaches you how to identify what you're feeling? How do you express it? How to ask for it? How to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it? Many people grow up learning math, science, history, sports, and professional skills, but emotional skills are often treated as something we're supposed to figure out on our own. Understanding our emotions isn't something most of us automatically know how to do. It's something many people learn over time through experience, reflection, and practice. Many people were never taught how to identify emotions beyond basic labels like happy, sad, angry, or stressed. Many were never taught how to communicate needs without feeling guilty, how to receive support without feeling weak, how to process grief, how to navigate rejection, how to have difficult conversations. And if we never learn those skills, it doesn't mean we don't have emotions. It simply means we may not have the tools to understand what they're trying to tell us. I have another prompt here for you guys. When I'm upset, do I actually know what I'm feeling, or do I tend to default to words like stressed, frustrated, or annoyed? So, what happens when someone grows up without learning those emotional skills? The answer isn't that they stop having emotions. The emotions are still there. The difference is that they may not know what to do with them. Think about it. Imagine someone loses their job. One person may recognize that underneath the stress, they're actually feeling fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of letting their family down, fear of not knowing what comes next. Someone else may never stop long enough to identify those emotions. Instead, they throw themselves into work. They stay busy, become irritable, or convince themselves that they're fine. The same thing can happen after a breakup, or after losing someone they love, or after receiving criticism, or after experiencing rejection. Sometimes what looks like anger is actually just hurt. Sometimes what looks like emotional distance is actually disappointment. Sometimes what looks like control is fear. Sometimes what looks like indifference is someone protecting themselves from being hurt again. When we don't understand what's happening beneath the surface, we often react to our emotions instead of responding to them. And those reactions can affect our relationships, our decisions, and the way we communicate, even the way we see ourselves. The goal isn't to never experience difficult emotions. The goal is to become curious enough to understand what they're trying to tell us. Because emotions aren't the enemy. Misunderstanding them often is. I have some prompts here for you guys. When I react emotionally, do I usually understand what I'm feeling beneath the surface? Or am I responding to the first emotion I notice without becoming curious about what's underneath? And the affirmation for this question is, I choose curiosity over judgment. As I become more aware of my emotions, I create opportunities for growth, healthier relationships, and wiser decisions. If many people grow up believing that they should handle everything alone, it's worth asking a simple question. What does strength actually look like? For a long time, strength has often been associated with independence, self sufficiency, pushing through, not complaining, not needing help. And while resilience is valuable, carrying everything alone isn't the same as being strong. In fact, sometimes it can prevent us from getting the support we need. Many of us are taught to approach life like a series of problems to solve. And to be fair, that mindset can be incredibly useful. It helps us accomplish goals, build careers, support our families, navigate challenges, but not every experience is a problem to solve. Some experiences are invitations to slow down, reflect, and feel. Some experiences need to be processed. You can't solve grief the same way you solve a flat tire. You can't solve loneliness the same way you go through logic alone. You can't solve disappointment by pretending it doesn't exist. And you can't heal emotions you refuse to acknowledge. Sometimes what we need isn't another solution. Sometimes we just need permission to be human. Sometimes we need honesty, honesty about what we're feeling, what we're carrying, and what we need. Maybe strength looks like asking for support, admitting you're overwhelmed. Maybe strength looks like expressing grief. Maybe strength looks like having a difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Or maybe it looks like letting people show up for you. And it's important to recognize that privacy and emotional avoidance are not the same thing. Not everyone wants to share every feeling with everyone around them, and that's completely normal. The goal isn't to tell the world everything that's going on in your life. The question is whether you understand what's going on with yourself. Can you identify what you're feeling? Can you acknowledge it? Can you sit with it? Can you communicate it when necessary? Because emotional awareness isn't about becoming less strong. It's about making sure strength isn't the only tool we have. The strongest people aren't necessarily the ones who never struggle. Sometimes they're the people who are willing to be honest about the fact that they do. I have another prompt here for you guys. What would change if I stopped viewing asking for support as weakness and started viewing it as a form of strength? And the affirmation for this question is, I release the belief that I must carry everything alone. I am worthy of support, connection, and understanding. The good news is that emotional awareness can be learned. No matter how old you are, no matter what messages you received growing up, no matter where you're starting from today. Because understanding yourself is less about having all the answers and more about being willing to ask better questions. Many of the patterns we carry into adulthood didn't appear overnight. The messages we receive about emotions don't always come from words. Sometimes they come from what we see, what we experience, and what is modeled around us. Every family, culture, and community has spoken and unspoken rules about emotions. We learn what is acceptable, what feels uncomfortable, what gets rewarded, and what gets ignored. And sometimes we don't just learn what to feel. We also learn what feels acceptable to express. So before we're old enough to question certain beliefs, we've already absorbed them. Many of our emotional habits were formed long before we had the ability to evaluate whether they were helping us. Sometimes the strongest lessons aren't what we're told. They're what we repeatedly observe. But awareness gives us an opportunity to pause, to reflect, to ask ourselves whether the patterns we've inherited are still serving us. Awareness creates choice, and choice creates change. The moment we become aware of a pattern, we have an opportunity to respond differently. Maybe that means having a conversation you've been avoiding. Maybe it means asking for support. Maybe it means becoming more honest about what you're feeling. Maybe it means giving yourself permission to experience emotions you've spent years pushing away. Whatever that looks like for you, growth doesn't begin when we become perfect. It begins when we become curious. Curious about our thoughts, our behaviors, curious about the stories we've been carrying, and curious about the possibility that we can learn new ways of relating to ourselves and to others. Because emotional awareness isn't about changing who you are. It's about understanding yourself more deeply. I have the last journal prompt here for you guys. What emotional tools do I wish I had learned earlier in life? And the final affirmation is, I am allowed to have needs. I am allowed to ask for support. As I become more aware of my patterns, I create new opportunities for growth, connection, and healing. My emotions do not make me weak. They make me human. Now let's end with our usual prayer. So put your hand on your chest and take a deep breath. Dear God, thank you for creating us with minds that think, hearts that feel, and emotions that help us navigate life. Help us become more aware of the patterns, beliefs, and messages we've carried throughout our lives. Give us the wisdom to recognize what is helping us grow and the courage to let go of what no longer serves us. Teach us that strength and vulnerability do not have to compete with each other. Help us understand that asking for support is not weakness, and that honesty can be a form of courage. For those carrying burdens in silence, remind them that they do not have to carry everything alone. For those who struggle to express what they feel, give them the language, confidence, and support to do so. For those who feel lonely, misunderstood, or disconnected, remind them that they are seen, valued, and loved. Help us become more compassionate toward ourselves and toward others as we continue learning, growing, and healing. Guide us as we seek deeper understanding, stronger connections, and healthier ways of caring for ourselves and the people around us. Amen. Thank you guys so much for spending this time with me today. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to take a few moments to reflect on the questions we discussed throughout the episode. Sometimes growth doesn't begin with having the answers. Sometimes it begins with becoming aware of the questions we've never asked ourselves. And if you think someone in your life could benefit from this conversation, consider sharing this episode with them. As always, if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to follow, leave a rating or review, and you could check out my store. All links are in the show notes and my Instagram bio. Your support helps this podcast reach more people and continue these conversations. Until next time, remember, you don't have to have everything figured out. You don't have to carry everything alone. And growth often begins with understanding yourself a little more deeply than you did yesterday. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you in the next episode.